It is time to spring clean your mind. I want today to think about spring in three particular ways. I want your focus to be on three things this spring that will help you, not just this spring, but throughout the year. What does spring mean to you? I would love you just to close your eyes and think about what it means to you. I'm from Canada. Spring to us meant the end of the snow. Sadly, the downside to that was all the dirt that had been used to cover up the ice and the dog poo that was left over just sits there. But of course, April showers that bring May flowers, April showers wash all that away. Moving to Florida, not quite the same change of seasons, but you know what happens in Florida in the spring? Spring training. And I get the opportunity with Deb to get on our bikes and ride down to see our Blue Jays in Dunedin starting spring training. Now, here's a little trivia on spring training. The very first team to do spring training was the New York Mutuals, and they did that in 1869. They took their team down to New Orleans. 1890s was when spring training really started to take off with the Philadelphia Phillies coming to Florida. And by 1913, there was an actual grapefruit league where baseball teams all played each other preseason. While we're talking though about baseball, when teams come down, here's the very first thing I want you to think about. When teams do come down to spring training, they focus on the basics. When they go to spring training, they only focus on four things: hitting, running, throwing, catching. Hitting, running, throwing, catching. I want you to think this spring, what are the basics? If you had to get back to basics so that you could be successful and significant in your life, what are those three or four things? Don't hurt yourself with all sorts of thoughts. Just think about those three or four things that you need to do to be a better version of yourself. The second thing I want you to think about when it comes to spring is it's a time for new life, a time of second chances, something that happens every year. After the darkness of winter, spring always arrives. And you know, some people actually give up in the dark times. Some people give up in the winters of their career, in the winters of their lives. But I'm here to tell you, I did some research this past week, and some of the greatest business achievements of our time happened to people who were older. They didn't give up. They didn't give up when things were bad. Ray Kroc introduced McDonald's in his late 50s. Colonel Sanders had his first Kentucky Fried Chicken location when he was 62. Incredible. Henry Ford was already a man in his mid 50s by the time he introduced the production line for automobiles. So spring is a time when we can get renewed and we can get ready. And then the third thing I want you to think about is sowing. Not sowing, but sowing seeds. If we want to reap a harvest at the end of 2024, a harvest into next year, we've got to sow seeds right now. And I want you to think about three things when it comes to sowing seeds. First, you will reap what you sow. If you want pumpkins, you got to sow pumpkin seeds. If you want a long-term sustainable legacy of leadership, then you've got to sow seeds of servant leadership. The second thing is a farmer always tends to his own field. Don't waste time looking at other people's fields, trying to check out how their crops are growing, what they're doing. Focus on your field. Focus on nurturing and developing your field. And thirdly, never give up. There's a scripture verse from Galatians where Paul says to the Galatians, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, because if we will reap a harvest if we don't give up." The key to sowing and reaping is never giving up, continuing to learn and develop and focus. I also would say, while we're talking about personal development, we have a big event coming up this month, April 20th, the Lighthouse Live event. If you're looking for an opportunity to sow some seeds into your own life so that you can reap the benefits of that, not just this year, but on a go-forward basis, I encourage you, as my friend John Maxwell said, to make this a priority. April 20th, Clearwater, Florida. Go to thelighthouse.collective.global to get your tickets. And in the meantime, Have an amazing April. Keep those thoughts focused on sowing so that you can reap. And of course, keep shining and be a light.